And I forgot to switch the audio setting. Okay. Nation building. And by nation building, okay, so I have the monitor in front of me so I can read my notes at least. Do I want to show Discord? No, I do not want to show Discord. So this topic came about because I was watching. I think I was watching Math Hoffa. I was watching a bit of Matt Hoffa, and to explain that, Matt Hoffa is a rapper. He has a barbershop. He also hosts a podcast at that same barbershop. He'll invite people from the industry, kind of chop it up with a variety of different topics. But it was watching Matt Hoffa, and it was a discussion about how, like, if you weren't dealing crack back in the 90s and the early 2000s, you weren't shit. That was the main discussion of the video, so I clicked on it, right? Curious. But then I was watching like one of Immortal Technique's Instagram's lives, and it got me to think about nation building and how people will view the world in a very specific way, but will forget to acknowledge the fact that there are different ways that you could view this world, and it all depends on what kind of hat you're wearing or what kind of position that you're administrating over or what sort of decisions you're overlooking. So some decisions, I would say, constitute on the realm of nation building, on the realm of right, there's a lot of importance there, and that importance comes from the fact of how much power do you have, how much resources do you have, how much of whatever you have control over can push and pull markets or push and pull people, because essentially that's all what nation building is. Because you need capital, and capital, when you get to that large level of pushing and moving, what you're really moving is material goods, right? Raw resource. So the state, right? So this is where Immortal Technique comes in, where he explains that America, as we like to call it a republic, as we like to entertain the idea that it's a capitalist country, he brings up the good bit that America failed. Corporate America failed 3 different times, and it's gotten bailed out 3 different times. And I was like, oh, he's right, right? If we're classifying things for what they are, and if we're describing what things really are, yeah, capitalism failed, but he talks about how America is a socialist country, but it's not socialist. It's only socialist to the very rich or the very poor. The people in the middle are kind of what power this whole system. And I was like, okay, here's some bigger ideas, right? But the reason why that's a bigger idea is because the reason why corporate America or capitalism hasn't failed is because government, by and large, has been subsidizing it, has been supplying it, has been essentially funding the whole operation. And it was a very unique idea to imagine that. Well, it's not unique, but what I'm saying is America is a socialist country, only for the incredibly rich or for the incredibly poor. And when I thought the idea more out myself, and I attached the realms of understanding of nation building, and you understand resource management. And the reason why I bring up resource management is because I think it was in Sri Lanka or somewhere in the Middle East, another one of their silos, or at least a location that holds a bunch of grain, that silo just blew up. And it makes me think of the logistics behind it. It makes me think of who has the sort of capability to understand, manage, and or maintain all of that information. And only people who have ship logs, only people who understand shipping lines, only people who understand the coming and going of the quantity, quality, and or the goods themselves. Um, so you would have to, right? The logistics looks like figuring out the shipyards, figuring out the ships, figuring out locations that could actually house millions or tons of this material or raw resource, figuring out processing plants, figuring out XYZ, right? This all pertains to, like, if we were going to go to war with a country, these are the sort of questions you need to be asking. Why do I think about these sorts of things? Because I can't shut this brain up sometimes. So when Immortal Technique was bringing up America being a socialist country, and if you know anything about monopolies and how they're created, by and large part, it's the state that has to help, because you can't just grab all the pieces on the chessboard and not incur some sort of justice and some sort of balancing of the situation. Some people, I don't know, you get into courts, you get into a variety of different aspects, but that's not where I'm going with this. Um, so nation building, and people's view of what they think this country is. They like to call it a republic, but so like I brought up logistics before with figuring out raw resources, the shipping lines, the storing, and all these other things. You could do the inverse with the levers of power in a government, and you can also figure out, to some degree, in a logistical standpoint of view, you could figure out whose decision gets to make what happen. And then you just figure out that essentially certain senators or certain positions of seat in certain states hold key power access to certain committees, certain boards, certain decision making councils that are created through government legislation, and figuring out the logistics of how it would be to take over that seat, this and that. And then I began to really map out how socialism, corporatism, capitalism all together form this really nice, sophisticated way of socialism, and how the back scratching, well, it's like an Ouroboros, right? It's a snake eating its own tail. It does not end, and the tail's so far in that I don't think you can pull that out. To what it is now on the Democrat side. Clearly that was true to some degree in the Republican Party, but you're starting to clearly see that they've begun to identify the parasites. They've begun to identify the people that are problematic in making certain movements or certain key decisions. Of course, everybody who just wants to be blamed Trump, but you can't really. That's too simple of a statement to solve the problem at hand. Coming down more to the fact of me drawing this idea out, I began to mold my opinion around that realm of understanding that corporate America, the corporate oligarchies, the corporate oligarchs, these councils, these committees, these lobbyist groups, not lobbyist groups, trust fund groups. If anybody doesn't know how a trust works, a trust has a board of a committee. They oversee the matters that deal with the trust. And I'm not talking about the trust. The trust is a trust that was formed, I think, in the 60s by Epstein, who was in the well. What the really weird thing about the trust, which is why I should mention this, is Jeffrey Epstein. It involves Jeffrey Epstein's first time ever meeting the Queen Elizabeth, and what the trust entails, nobody really knows. People have just correlated to the fact that, like, look, the same day the Queen got coordinated or crowned, the same day the Queen of England got crowned, was the same day the trust was formed, and the person who controlled it was Jeffrey Epstein. I don't know. Very weird dates that align for very weird reasons, but that's not where I'm going with this. Right? Because that's an aspect of nation building, but that's more of in the intelligence side of things. Blackmail, keeping tabs on people who have, right, like Jeffrey Epstein. Just look at what he was doing. Just look at who he was blackmailing in particular, and you'd realize that he was going after a very peculiar type of people who worked at Harvard, people who were professors, people who were distinguished scientists in realms of their field. um and he's like, oh, so why would he target scientists? He's targeting scientists because he wanted to genetically modify a race of his own kids. I don't know. Kind of weird woo woo if you ask me. That's something that's documentable. It's provable. The Zorro Ranch, that was his whole purpose. This is information that is inside the court documents. Da 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 da. Read, people, read. But it also comes down to, well, back to nation building and back to how corporate America, right? If we could just look at how this system operates, maneuvers itself, maintains itself, you can draw a lot of interesting conclusions. So when I was originally having these ideas, I wrote down some notes. People view it through the lens of normal life. These people do not view it through the lens of normal life. They view it through the lens of nation building. And if anybody's ever heard, there's a game, it's a PC game, and I think it's on consoles too. It's called Civilization. In a sense, you're building a civilization. You're building an empire. And I use that analogy here. The people running the show run this like a live game of Civilization, but on actual expert building mode, right? Because this is real life. You have to manage companies. You're risking a lot of capital, a lot of money, usually when you're venturing off into doing any of these entrepreneurial activities. But the player has been cutthroat since day one. Look at Standard Oil, look at the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, look at just how they built their empires. They weren't very nice people. Monopolizing the markets, monopolizing the security of the land, sea, and air. Land, sea, and air are guaranteed by the Bretton Woods Agreement, which was essentially all these big financial bigwigs who came together, figured out that this is the way the world's going to work, and this is the way that money and goods and all these raw resources are going to move. So to some degree, none of these things would happen, none of these things would move if it wasn't for U.S. military involvement. If it wasn't for that guarantee, I don't think the world market would work the way it does, because, pirates still roam the seas, if you didn't know. Monopolizing all modern technology, supply lines, logistics, intelligent networks, and religions. Hell, for sport, by they I mean the people who get to make these big decisions, will sometimes make personal decisions on matters to make jokes at the intelligence of the populace. For example, like mentioning a horrifying experiment, the Tuskegee experiment, and minting the animal that caused this all, the bat, and this whole mess, and printed this whole mess on money, making an obvious fact that they basically gave you the truth of what's going on, and they made it as readily available as it being in your pocket, right? If you ever got any of the quarters from 2020, the United States quarter, right? You look at the back of it, the special printed ones that come out every year. For 2021, they printed a bat, and they printed the Tuskegee Airmen. But who cares about the Tuskegee Airmen? The fact that they put these two things, right, the animal that caused this all, and the fact that they're mentioning the Tuskegee, the Tuskegee experiments were some of the most horrifying things that were discovered here in the United States. And it was a part of an old school eugenics program that probably started in the 20s or the 30s, where it was entirely designed to spread a certain kind of disease amongst the African American populace, to kill them all, to wipe them off the face of the earth. Just look at their obsession with the Jamaican Islands, look at their obsession with Africa, and look at the agenda of modern pharmaceutical companies. Some people say, oh man, you're just looking too much. I'm like, dude, this is a repeated pattern that's been happening decade after decade. But yet the only thing that seems to keep changing is the faggot who keeps denying this, and the faggot who has to keep suspending disbelief because he doesn't want to read any of the material. Either way, that's a whole other fucking topic. Why allow people who have no business with power get to decide such matters of importance? Oh yeah. And this comes down to a phrase that I remember. Pilot, what's his name? Dwight the Pilot Man. Real shit. I don't even remember his name. Uriel. Fuck. What's his name? Why can't I remember his name? Either way, but he said something that I've heard before in other places, but recently he was the one that said it. Why cast pearls to swine? So, right, the way the elite see it, the way that the people who understand logistics, the people who understand markets, the people who understand all of this bigger scheme shit, they look at it as, why am I going to give you power? Why am I going to give you all of these abilities to make all these important decisions when you, right, the way they see it, when you don't have the facility to make as much profit from it the way I do? You know, power consolidates towards people who understand how to use it, is the way I see it. Because there'll always be somebody who comes by, looks at exactly what you have, will be able to reverse engineer it and be like, oh, you can make more money if you squeeze it out this way. And that's what CEO and like this new aristocrat, this new noblige, what do you call it? Their guarded wall, whatever, right? Like in a kingdom, right? You had the inner walls, and the people who lived on the inner walls were like nobility, merchants, people of affluence. I forgot where I was gonna take that idea. Yeah, nation, but oh yeah, they don't want. They understand what they're doing, right? They've taught kid after kid, generation through generation, what this means, how to do it, how to manage resource, how to manage people, how to, you know what I'm saying? How to XYZ build an empire. But building an empire now in America is building a startup company, building a brand, building something, right? Building a brand more than anything now is what makes you nobility. Building a right, amassing people behind your brand is the same thing as people amassing themselves under a prince, under a viscount, under somebody else, right? So when you look at Nike, think of them like that. They're a brand. They represent a sort of kingdom, and the people that follow them are their subjects. It's kind of funny when you think about it, right? Because they're paying for goods, and those profits go directly to. Either way, I don't know. I'm thinking way too much about this now. Because in reality, I was just pointing out that the people who play this game or who understand the ins and outs of it play this cutthroat as fuck, and they actually play this beyond any simulation that could come out of a video game, right? That could simulate all of these different aspects of empire building. So when you think about it, there's a lot more blackmail, there's a lot more gang activity, there's a lot more boots on the ground activity that has to happen in order for a lot of these bigger international moves to be facilitated. And Immortal Technique's example of calling America a lemonade stand it will not really hit somebody hard in the head because they don't understand what that means. Because what he's trying to describe is that America put a gun to everybody's fucking head and told them, we're taking your shit and you're not going to tell us anything, and we're going to just give you pennies for this shit. Right? They told that to everybody. So when they take coconuts from Hawaii, when they take the pineapples from, or was it pineapples or bananas? Whatever monopoly was established in Hawaii. Whenever they go to these areas and take their raw resource, they're not giving them a fair trade, right? If they were giving them a fair trade, then why are the mines in Africa so poor? Why, from the people that are buying this in bulk from the workers, all the way to the workers, why are all of them poor? Why are the only people really seeing the net profit from all of this are the people who, you know what I mean? Samsung, Apple, cell phone manufacturers, graphics cards manufacturers. They're the ones that are actually seeing real profit from getting all these raw resources from Africa. but nobody really asked the question of what's holding up. What are the things that are holding up all of this wealth? What is not allowing for this transfer of wealth to happen? And when you think about it, and when you kind of point it out, it's a lot of it has to come down to somebody's choked up the market at those locations and does not allow for anybody else to make a profit, or the export of it is illegal, or some way, right? It all comes down to bureaucracy allowing for something has to allow that chokehold, right? There's a reason why you could go to Africa, find diamonds all over the street, but you can't take them home. You can't take any of them home. So I thought they were supposed to be rare. I thought they were supposed to be. You get into this whole notion of what understanding resources and understanding that they're not all rare. And it's not that they're not all rare, it's just that there's explanations to all these things, but things should not be as expensive as they are, and things should not be. These places that have all this raw resource should not be as poor as they are, but they're only poor as they are is because to some degree America or whatever country has that slice of the pie gets to dictate what the price of the resource is. So they give them pennies and then pocket all the money that they get. So it's why the lemonade stand doesn't. The lemonade stand analogy doesn't work for an average American citizen because they don't understand. You don't know what the price of the lemon is. You didn't buy that pitcher. Like, it's understanding that the American market is a facade. You're not paying the real price of anything, because by the time that somebody is offering you the price for a bulk of something, they've already have their cut from that product that they're selling you, right? Because they could have just paid China like $2 for that whole packet, but you didn't. You know what I mean? Like, then how much was the petroleum? How much was the raw resource for that chemical? How much was it for the molding, the this, the that, the packaging? To some degree, you could say that, yeah, you can figure that out, but at the same time, I'm like, nah, you can't, because the Bretton Woods Agreement, the way that all of these treaties and the way that all of these what do you call them, agreements, the way that most of these agreements were drawn up between certain nations and between certain corporations and between certain merchants only really benefits one side of the person making that deal, because it was always made at the threat of a gun. Welcome to the Discovery Doctrine. when it went wrong. But yeah, my name is Ramirez. I think I've spoken too much. Okay, yeah, 23 minutes. My name is Ramirez. This is FrogBear, and this was the topic.